Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. Alice Adams and Tibor Vass were co-workers at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. Living just 6 miles from the hotel, Alice had joined the team 3 weeks earlier and quickly built friendships with her colleagues, especially Tibor. Born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, Tibor was a sociable and warm-hearted person who loved music and could play nearly every instrument, with the piano being his favorite. He had taught his younger sister, Isabella, how to play piano, and together they often performed for their parents. Tragedy struck in 2007 when Tibor's father passed away, leaving the family devastated. As a teenager, Tibor assumed greater responsibility for supporting his mother, Rosalia, and younger sister. At 15, he began working full-time to help ease his mother's financial struggles. In 2008, he applied to the University of Budapest, hoping that earning a degree would provide better job opportunities and stability for his family. Despite his remarkable talent, Tibor was unfortunately denied admission to the university. He discussed his future plans with his mother and expressed his desire to move to Great Britain, a decision she supported. In July 2010, at 19 years old, Tibor relocated to the United Kingdom and settled in London. He started working at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel, where he enjoyed his duties, the work environment, and the chance to interact with colleagues and guests. Tibor quickly developed a friendship with Alice, who was also musically gifted, and they often bonded over shared interests. Both worked as receptionists alongside 31-year-old Attila Ban, the hotel's longest-serving employee, who had been recognized as the establishment's best employee in 2010. Since both Tibor and Attila were Hungarian, they naturally became close friends. The hotel provided accommodation for new employees, and both men lived in a company apartment located behind the hotel. This arrangement was convenient, saving them commuting time and living expenses. Tibor was delighted with his new life in England, yet he still aspired to pursue higher education. He reapplied to the University of Budapest and was accepted the following year. Overjoyed, he prepared to return to Hungary in August 2011. To celebrate his departure, a small farewell party was held on August 9, 2011, attended by Tibor, Attila, Alice, and other hotel staff. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. The following day, the three were scheduled to work, but none of them appeared. Concerned colleagues raised the alarm when they failed to arrive for their 7 a.m. shift, and police were notified at 7:53 a.m. When officers arrived at the apartment, they found the front door unlocked and the interior silent. Upon entering, an officer encountered a horrifying scene. Alice lay on the living room floor, her face covered with a pillow and her body bearing 22 stab wounds, as confirmed later by medical examiners. In the bedroom, Tibor's naked body was discovered on the bed, dead from 2 stab wounds to the heart. Attila, however, was missing. Police quickly secured the property, and forensic experts began their examination. During the investigation, they determined that the bed where Tibor's body was found was not where he had been killed. The bed appeared too neat, suggesting that Tibor had been attacked elsewhere, undressed, cleaned, and then placed on the bed post-mortem. Upon further examination, the apartment was found to contain empty alcohol bottles and traces of illicit substances, indicating that they had been consumed during a party. Police officers meticulously searched the residence, the surrounding area, and even the attic for Attila Ban, but he was nowhere to be found. His personal belongings, including his identification papers, remained inside the apartment. Consequently, Attila became the primary suspect in the investigation. While forensic experts continued analyzing the crime scene, detectives began interviewing Attila's co-workers at the hotel. Staff members revealed that Attila had taken a special interest in Tibor, the new Hungarian employee, immediately offering him guidance and helping him adjust to his new environment. Attila even went as far as to modify his work schedule to align with Tibor's. Tibor, being young and attractive, naturally drew considerable female attention. However, investigators discovered that Attila had developed romantic feelings for Tibor, which he openly expressed. According to the hotel staff, Tibor had politely rejected Attila's advances, which deeply upset him. Matters escalated when Alice joined the hotel staff 3 weeks before her death, and Tibor began showing interest in her. Attila grew jealous despite knowing that Tibor was only attracted to women. This raised a critical question for investigators. Could Attila have committed the murders out of jealousy and unreciprocated affection? A disturbing Facebook post made by Attila shortly before the discovery of the bodies strongly suggested his involvement. At 6:23 a.m., Attila posted, "I would like to wake up from that nightmare." Concerned friends commented under the post, but Attila never replied. This message further strengthened investigators' suspicions that Attila Ban was responsible for the deaths of his colleagues. The sheer number of stab wounds provided a clear reflection of the crime's brutality. Alice had suffered 22 stab wounds, while Tibor had only 2. Furthermore, the victims' positions offered crucial insights. Alice was found on the living room floor with a pillow covering her face, whereas Tibor was discovered on the bed. When investigators interviewed those who had been present at the apartment earlier that evening, they learned that Attila, Tibor, and Alice were the last ones remaining. This indicated that the tragic events occurred after the others had left, in the hours leading up to dawn. The news of Alice's death sent shockwaves through both families, the victims and the suspects. The Adams family, heartbroken by their daughter's loss, released a public statement in which Alice's mother, Sarah, delivered a deeply emotional tribute to her beloved child. She expressed her profound grief, saying, "My heart is shattered into a million pieces. I will carry this sorrow for the rest of my life. I miss my beloved Alice terribly and would give anything to hug her once more and see her radiant smile. Losing my child has stirred unbearable emotions within our family, sorrow, anger, and a devastation we can hardly endure. As a mother, I feel I failed to protect my daughter, and that painful truth haunts me every day. Not knowing exactly what happened to Alice on the night of her murder is an unending torment. I would rather confront the painful truth than be left to imagine the series of events that led to her death. Alice was an exceptional and irreplaceable person who brought immense love, joy, passion, and kindness into the lives of everyone she met. Her loss is a tragedy beyond description. Meanwhile, police continued searching for Attila Ban, but he appeared to have vanished without a trace. When investigators attempted to trace his phone, they discovered that it was sending signals from the same vicinity as the hotel, which struck them as peculiar. It was later uncovered that Attila had been much closer than anyone had imagined. After spending 2 days examining the crime scene, the investigative team left the house, only for the forensic unit to return later to perform additional examinations. Upon re-entering the residence, they found that the door they had previously left unlocked was now secured from the inside. Inside the room, they discovered Attila Ban lying on the bed, intoxicated and injured after attempting to harm himself using scissors and a knife. Investigators tried to question Attila, but he behaved strangely, relying on gestures to communicate his thoughts. He was then transported to the hospital for medical treatment. Unknown to the investigators at the time, Attila had constructed a secret hiding compartment within the sofa bed where Tibor Vass's body had been found. To create this improvised hiding area, he had cut a slit into the bed frame, taken a phone and several bottles of water, and concealed himself inside. Throughout the investigation, Attila had been covertly observing and listening to the police through small holes he had made in the furniture. Attila Ban was subsequently arrested at the hospital as the prime suspect in the double homicide. His trial commenced on July 9, 2012, and during the proceedings, harrowing details about the crime came to light. The party had spiraled out of control after Tibor, Alice, and Attila were left alone in the apartment. Prosecutors confirmed that a consensual physical encounter had occurred among the three, supported by DNA evidence discovered on Miss Adams's body. The night then descended into chaos. Attila claimed to have no recollection of the events that followed, stating only that he awoke the next morning to find both Alice and Tibor dead. Overcome with guilt and remorse, he contemplated ending his life but lacked the courage to do so alone. The court was told that Attila had been consumed by jealousy toward Tibor, particularly after a team-building event where he threw a fit because Tibor was included in a photograph while he was not. Matters deteriorated further when Attila learned that Tibor had been accepted into a university program in Hungary and would soon be leaving the United Kingdom. The final breaking point likely came when Attila witnessed Tibor and Alice kissing, an event that sent him into a jealous rage, ultimately driving him to take the lives of both his friends. Prosecutor Richard Whittam revealed in court that Attila Ban had been found naked on a single bed, suffering injuries to his wrists, forearm, and neck. It was later determined that he had been hiding in the base of a double bed. Remarkably, He had succeeded in hiding himself and staying unnoticed throughout the entire investigation, including the pathologist's examination, the removal of the bodies, and the inspection by the crime scene investigator. When questioned about this oversight, Detective Inspector John Finch defended the police, asserting that it would be impractical and potentially harmful to lift every bed in search of someone. He explained that such actions could lead to the loss of vital forensic evidence and were not standard practice in such investigations. Rosalia, the mother of Tibor Vass, paid a heartfelt tribute to her son, remembering him as a kind, outgoing, and talented young man. She reminisced about his childhood interests in music, art, and sports, as well as his enthusiasm for photography, which inspired him to purchase a professional camera with his first paycheck. According to Rosalia, Tibor had numerous friends in both Hungary and the UK who cherished his kind and supportive personality. She stated that on August 11th, she received devastating news. Her 20-year-old son, Tibor, and his friend Alice had been murdered. The killer was a shocking revelation, Tibor's own friend, whom she had trusted to look after her son. This friend had personally vowed to keep Tibor safe, which made the news even harder to bear. Just days before the murder, she had found comfort in believing that Tibor had made a mature and intelligent friend in London. Now, she was overwhelmed by grief and struggled to comprehend the tragedy. The ensuing police investigation and trial only deepened her pain, forcing her to relive the horrors of that dreadful night. The anguish and loss her family endures will remain with them for the rest of their lives. The perpetrator, Attila Ban, pleaded guilty but claimed he could not recall the details of the crime. On July 18, 2012, the jury reached a guilty verdict after only 5 hours of deliberation. A month later, on August 17, Attila Ban received 2 life sentences. He must serve 26 years before becoming eligible for parole. Moving on to the next case. Dr. Thomas Burchard. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, as the second child of Samantha Ingram, who had dreams of becoming a model and dancer. During her childhood, Kelsey grew up with her older brother, Colin. After her birth, the family relocated to Jonesboro, Arkansas, a small industrial town where Kelsey spent most of her early years. However, her family life took a turn for the worse when her parents divorced after several years. Following the separation, her father returned to Virginia. Kelsey blossomed into a striking young woman with a perfect figure and captivating features that could easily pave the way for a modeling career. Nevertheless, she found school dull and instead preferred socializing with friends, dating, and attending various social events. Her ultimate goal was to achieve fame, to appear on magazine covers, give interviews, and walk the red carpet at major events. Despite her ambition, Kelsey lacked genuine talent and had to depend on her youth and physical beauty to get by. While in high school, she began attending modeling auditions in hopes of launching her career. Her mother, Samantha, who had long dreamed of becoming a model herself, was thrilled to support her daughter's aspirations. Unfortunately, Kelsey's modeling career was limited to a few minor photo shoots for clothing catalogs. At 18, Kelsey married Jerry Turner when she was already pregnant. Their daughter, Beverly, was born shortly after their wedding. However, the marriage quickly fell apart and ended in divorce. By the age of 20, after abandoning her traditional modeling pursuits, Kelsey decided to enter the world of men's magazine modeling. She rapidly caught the attention of several adult publications. Kelsey viewed this as the start of a promising career and a pathway to the glamorous life she had always envisioned. Over the years, Kelsey received several modeling opportunities, including photo shoots for popular magazines such as Playboy and Maxim, along with a session for 110 magazine. She frequently traveled to major cities like Los Angeles and Las Vegas to pursue these prospects. In an interview, Kelsey described herself as a curvy blonde with a slim waist and expressed her carefree personality, saying that she enjoyed having fun, partying with friends, and living life to the fullest. Kelsey paid little attention to the future. She often changed partners and quickly spent whatever money she earned or received from admirers. At the age of 23, Kelsey became pregnant again and gave birth to a son named Josh. The child's father refused to marry her or acknowledge his son. When her modeling offers began to decline, Kelsey turned to social media to build a following. She actively managed her accounts, sharing provocative photos of herself wearing swimsuits, lingerie, or only partially covering her body. Kelsey curated a flawless online persona. Her carefully edited photos made her appear stunning, and her social media profiles displayed her visits to luxury boutiques, stylish nightclubs, and other fashionable places. However, this polished image concealed the harsh reality of a single mother raising 2 children. Despite projecting a wealthy lifestyle, she struggled financially, as she was poor at managing money and often spent all her earnings immediately. Around 2016, Kelsey encountered serious difficulties after a tragic incident involving her daughter. The girl endured severe trauma, which left her withdrawn and unable to speak. An acquaintance advised her to take her daughter to a psychiatrist. Following this suggestion, she reached out to the well-known pediatric psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Burchard, who practiced in Monterey, California, to seek treatment for her daughter. Dr. Thomas Burchard was a highly respected pediatric psychiatrist, born on February 16, 1948, in Boston, Massachusetts. He was the son of a prominent architect and engineer, and his family later relocated to Virginia. Although his father taught architecture at several prestigious institutions, including Harvard, Thomas decided to pursue a different path and embarked on a medical career specializing in child psychology. After graduating from medical school, Dr. Thomas completed his residency in pediatric psychiatry at several top hospitals and also taught at universities throughout the country. He eventually settled at a public clinical hospital on California's Monterey Peninsula, where he worked for more than 40 years as a pediatric psychiatrist, earning an impeccable reputation for his extraordinary ability to connect with young patients and handle even the most complex and severe cases. He earned his doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley. Thomas was known for his kindness, intelligence, and remarkable generosity. His compassionate nature inspired him to help those in need, especially children whose parents could not afford treatment. He often paid for hospital care for sick children from low-income families and offered support to single mothers. Dr. Thomas had a longtime companion named Di, who worked as his assistant, housekeeper, and possibly more. As someone who knew him closely, Di was the first to notice changes in his behavior that indicated early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. As Dr. Thomas entered his 70s, he became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and distracted. To conceal these symptoms from his colleagues, he began keeping detailed diaries and notebooks to record crucial information such as names, dates, and events. He always carried a small notebook in his breast pocket containing sensitive data like bank details, account numbers, passwords, and card pins. When Kelsey first visited Dr. Thomas with her daughter, she explained her challenges as a single mother and her inability to afford treatment. The doctor kindly offered his services free of charge, and even gave Kelsey $300 to help support her children. Kelsey was surprised but soon realized that by sharing emotional stories about her difficult life, she could extract more money from the elderly doctor. Kelsey carefully devised a plan for her next appointment with Dr. Thomas. During the visit, she told a sorrowful story about her youngest son's illness and her lack of money to buy the costly medicine he needed. She mentioned a specific amount she required and, to her surprise, received the entire sum from Dr. Thomas. Kelsey continued fabricating emotional stories in her subsequent visits, inventing hardships to gain increasingly larger amounts of money from the trusting doctor. Naturally, she did not use this money for her children, but instead spent it on her own pleasures, including luxury clothing. Not wanting to return to her hometown in Virginia, Kelsey persuaded Thomas to pay her rent in California, claiming that it would be easier for her to find work there and that the climate was better suited for her children. Thomas agreed and paid for the apartment that Kelsey had selected. Some people suspected that the doctor was having an affair with Kelsey, a young blonde model, and that this was the reason he continually gave in to her demands. However, Kelsey insisted that Thomas treated her and her children like family and acted purely out of kindness, not affection. Thomas provided Kelsey and her children with a place to live, covered their bills, and gave them substantial financial support for their needs. He even leased a luxury Mercedes-Benz convertible for her use. Over time, Kelsey came to realize that her modeling career was effectively over and that her youth was slipping away. Despite this realization, she made no attempt to find another job and instead continued to depend entirely on Dr. Thomas for financial support. During this period, he spent nearly $500,000 on Kelsey and her children. However, she squandered this money on personal indulgences including breast augmentation and liposuction, hoping to reignite her modeling career. Kelsey's excessive spending and party-filled lifestyle caused her to neglect her children. This neglect eventually led her ex-husband, who had won full custody of their daughter through the courts, to strip Kelsey of her parental rights. As a result, she was left with only her youngest son. Thomas became furious when he learned of the situation, but his anger was directed toward Kelsey rather than her ex-husband. It became clear that Kelsey had neglected her children and had been using the money intended for their care to maintain her extravagant lifestyle. Dr. Thomas decided to confront Kelsey, informing her that he would no longer support her luxurious and idle way of life. In response, Kelsey threatened to spread false rumors suggesting that Dr. Thomas had inappropriate feelings toward his young patients. Although he knew the allegations were entirely false, Dr. Thomas realized that even the mere suggestion of such rumors could irreparably damage his reputation as a respected pediatric psychiatrist and academic. Faced with this threat, Dr. Burchard reluctantly yielded to Kelsey's demands and continued to support her financially. In 2019, Kelsey moved to Las Vegas with her son in an attempt to revive her modeling career, expecting Thomas, whom she was actively blackmailing, to finance her efforts. Following her instructions, Thomas rented her a house and provided the money she requested. However, after receiving the funds, Kelsey vanished for 2 months, and her whereabouts remained unknown. Later that year, in February, Kelsey resurfaced, contacting Thomas in a highly emotional state and claiming she was gravely ill, unable to work, and in desperate financial need. When Thomas refused to assist her, Kelsey's demeanor shifted drastically, and she resumed threatening and blackmailing him. Judy, who was close to Thomas, advised him to report Kelsey's behavior to the police and to contact Child Protective Services, given the ongoing concerns about Kelsey's ability to care for her young son, especially since she had already lost custody of her older daughter. Dr. Thomas began taking precautions in case his conflict with Kelsey escalated into legal action. He informed several of his colleagues about the situation, and they agreed to stand by and support him. Judy had already attempted to resolve the matter by speaking directly with Kelsey. Unfortunately, her efforts only led to Kelsey threatening retaliation. Thomas decided to go to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's situation. Judy tried to dissuade him, but he remained determined to travel to Las Vegas and meet with Kelsey in person. Judy even offered to accompany him as a supportive friend, but Dr. Thomas insisted on managing the situation on his own. He finally departed on March 1, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists became lost while driving through Nevada. Attempting to reach Lake Mead, they turned onto a dirt road off the main highway and stumbled upon a Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the desert. The roof was closed and the windows were rolled up, yet unusually, there was no one anywhere near the vehicle. Curious, the tourists approached the car cautiously and noticed that one of the windows was broken. Upon closer inspection, they peered inside and observed clear signs of a struggle. Blood stains were visible all over the car's interior. Horrified, the tourists quickly contacted the police to report what they had found. Officers arrived at the location around noon and were immediately struck by an unbearable stench. The source of the odor was discovered once they opened the trunk. Inside, officers found the body of an elderly man hidden beneath a pile of furniture and rags. Next to him lay a blood-stained baseball bat. The victim was later identified as Dr. Thomas, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy had reported him missing on March 2nd after being unable to reach him for their scheduled meeting. She instantly feared that something terrible had occurred and notified the police, hoping he might still be found alive. The autopsy revealed numerous severe injuries on Thomas's body. These included scratches, bruises, and surface cuts, as well as a serious head wound likely inflicted by the baseball bat discovered beside him in the trunk. Part of his ear had been severed, and his hands were covered in defensive wounds indicating a desperate attempt to protect himself. Thomas's face bore distinct bruises with a unique patterned imprint. Most disturbing of all was the evidence showing that he had been placed in the car's trunk while still alive and severely injured, ultimately suffocating in the extreme desert heat. The investigation quickly centered on Kelsey Turner as the main suspect since the vehicle found at the crime scene had been rented under her name. Judy provided police with Kelsey's address, which matched the location that Dr. Thomas had gone to visit. However, when officers arrived at the property, they found it completely deserted. Although no one was present, the home displayed clear signs of a hurried cleanup. Containers of cleaning supplies were scattered throughout the house, and the strong scent of household chemicals filled the air, suggesting that someone had attempted to eliminate evidence of the crime. The residence was shared by Kelsey, her 4-year-old son, and her new boyfriend, John Logan Kennison, along with 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Yerrick. All of them had fled, making each a suspect, since Kelsey alone could not have inflicted such extensive injuries on the doctor or placed his body into the trunk of her car by herself. Jeremy Yerrick was the only individual the police managed to interview. He stated that he and his girlfriend had left Kelsey's house while the doctor was still alive. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had been drinking heavily and began flirting with Thomas, attempting to extort money from him in the same way Kelsey did. This enraged Kelsey, who accused Jeremy's girlfriend of trying to steal Thomas from her. The argument intensified, forcing Jeremy to quickly remove his girlfriend from the house to prevent a physical altercation. He did not return for several days and claimed to have no knowledge of what occurred after he left. During the investigation, police learned from Judy that Dr. Thomas always carried a notebook containing his bank account details and passwords, which he frequently misplaced. Upon searching, investigators discovered that the notebook was missing. Furthermore, 2 of Dr. Thomas's accounts showed large withdrawals on March 3rd, after which all his bank accounts and cards were promptly closed. On March 21st, in Stockton, California, police apprehended Kelsey and her boyfriend while they attempted to withdraw money once again. It was later uncovered that the couple had been staying at multiple motels with a child, paying exclusively in cash, and frequently changing locations. They initially tried to drain all of Thomas's accounts but failed. Their next attempt to withdraw additional money was meant to fund their escape to Mexico, but they were thwarted when the accounts had already been frozen. Diana, a neighbor who had been at Kelsey's residence that night, cooperated with authorities and provided her version of the events from the night of March 7th. According to her, the conflict began after Jeremy and his girlfriend had left. Kelsey engaged in a heated argument with Dr. Thomas, who refused to give her more money. Kelsey responded by threatening to destroy the doctor's reputation with fabricated rumors of misconduct involving young patients. As the dispute escalated, Kelsey became physically aggressive. Dr. Thomas, feeling endangered, locked himself inside his room. However, John forcefully broke the door open with a powerful shoulder strike and struck Thomas violently with a baseball bat. This blow caused a severe injury, resulting in a major hematoma and a heavy nosebleed. Diana rushed into the room, pleading with them to stop. Observing Thomas's condition, she begged them to take him to a hospital, fearing the consequences of what they had done. When Thomas mentioned that he would report the incident to the police, saying he had been attacked and robbed by strangers, the group moved toward the garage. Kelsey ordered Diana to return to the house and clean up every trace of blood. Diana followed the instructions and began scrubbing, but soon after, she heard screams and sounds of a struggle coming from the garage. She ran back and witnessed the couple savagely beating Dr. Thomas inside the car. The doctor was trapped, unable to flee or defend himself. It was evident that Kelsey and John never intended to take Thomas to a hospital. Instead, they planned to kill him using a baseball bat, a small knife, and John's unloaded pistol, which left distinct bruises on the doctor's face. Diana was then told to go back to the house and keep cleaning. Terrified for her own life, she obeyed and left the garage. While Diana was still cleaning, she heard the sound of the couple's car driving away. Several hours later, John's car returned with Kelsey, but the other vehicle, the convertible, was no longer there. Diana did not know where the convertible had gone until she heard news about a car discovered in the desert with a body inside its trunk. From the beginning, Diana chose to cooperate with the authorities by agreeing to a plea deal and revealing all the information she possessed. This cooperation led to a reduced sentence for evidence tampering, resulting in only 3 years of imprisonment. John Logan Kennison was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 18 years. Kelsey Turner's trial turned out to be more complex. Following her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, which caused significant delays in the judicial process. While in custody, she gave birth to a baby girl who, along with her son, was placed under the care of social services, as none of Kelsey's relatives were willing to assume responsibility for the children. Kelsey Turner was sentenced in January 2023 to 25 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after serving at least 10 years. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Correctional Center for Women in Las Vegas. Moving on to the next case. Eric Richins. Eric Richins was born on May 13, 1982, and left a lasting impression on everyone who knew him. As a child, Eric had a strong passion for sports, actively engaging in basketball, baseball, and soccer, which highlighted both his athletic ability and his enthusiasm for physical activity. However, Eric's greatest passion was anything related to the outdoors. He was an outstanding hunter, celebrated for his remarkable marksmanship, and had accumulated an impressive collection of trophy animals from various parts of the world. With his lively personality, Eric had the gift of brightening any room he entered, spreading happiness and laughter through his entertaining stories, playful pranks, and infectious laughter. As an adventurous spirit, Eric embraced life to the fullest in Utah, where he owned a wide variety of motorized vehicles, including trucks, four-wheelers, and snowmobiles. He delighted in exploring nature and savoring the excitement of adventure. Despite his love of excitement and fun, Eric remained deeply devoted to his faith as a committed member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. His family supported him on a 2-year mission to Mexico City, where he became fluent in Spanish. After completing high school, he attended the University of Utah, earning a degree in international studies with a minor in Spanish in 2009. While working in construction, Eric often visited Home Depot, where he met Curry Darden. Over time, the two developed a friendly rapport, and Eric found himself drawn to her beauty and charming personality. However, he was too shy to approach her directly, so he asked a friend to help him obtain her phone number. One day, while Eric was shopping at Home Depot, his friend subtly asked Curry for her phone number, explaining that Eric was interested in getting to know her. Eric eagerly waited to see if his plan would succeed. He then took the initiative and called Curry to arrange their first in-person meeting, unaware that it would forever change his life. From the moment they met, they instantly connected, and their first date marked the beginning of a romantic journey. As they introduced one another to their families, their bond grew even stronger. Curry's family welcomed Eric warmly, and his family was equally impressed by Curry's character and how naturally she fit into Eric's life. Although Eric's sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially cautious, they soon embraced Curry and accepted her as part of the family. In 2013, Eric and Curry were married in a small, intimate ceremony, officially sealing their relationship. After their marriage, Curry gave birth to their first child, Carter, followed by Ashton and then Weston, completing their perfect family. Eric took to fatherhood naturally, and his sons deeply admired him. He took great pride in his boys' achievements, whether they excelled academically, athletically, or artistically. Eric always showed his unwavering support by attending their activities and celebrating their successes. Later, Eric founded a prosperous stone masonry business that thrived thanks to his outstanding craftsmanship and meticulous attention to detail. Clients sought him out for his skill in producing exquisite stonework. The business ensured financial stability for Eric and his family. Additionally, Curry, who worked in real estate, contributed to their income through her entrepreneurial drive and in-depth knowledge of the local housing market. She would purchase homes, renovate them, and sell them for profit. Together, the Richins family enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle that represented the pinnacle of success. However, their seemingly perfect life came to an abrupt end on March 4, 2020, when Curry called 911 to report that her husband Eric was unresponsive. When paramedics arrived, they determined that Eric had already passed away. Overcome with grief, Curry called her mother, Lisa, who rushed to be by her side. Curry's brothers, DJ and Ronnie, were also present, overwhelmed with tears and disbelief as the three struggled to process Eric's sudden passing. Curry recounted that the evening had started happily as they celebrated her latest real estate achievement, the purchase of a luxurious mansion. Before going to bed, Curry had even prepared Eric's favorite drink, a Moscow Mule, mixing ginger beer with vodka. Curry went to bed around 9 p.m., but ended up sleeping in her 9-year-old son's room because he was having nightmares. Later, at around 3 a.m., she returned to the bedroom she shared with Eric. When she touched him, she was shocked to find him ice-cold and unresponsive. Despite trying to wake him, she could not, and immediately realized that something was terribly wrong. As she waited for the paramedics to arrive, Curry recalled following the dispatcher's instructions to perform CPR on Eric. The paramedics were initially puzzled by the cause of death, speculating that it might have been an aneurysm given Eric's apparent good health and lack of medical issues. However, further investigation revealed that Eric had complained to Curry about chest pains the night before his death, which at first supported the aneurysm theory. But the autopsy results were astonishing. Eric's cause of death was determined to be a lethal dose of fentanyl. Fentanyl is an extremely powerful pain medication that can be highly dangerous and even fatal when consumed in excessive amounts. After Eric's death, a crucial question arose. How did this substance enter his system? From the beginning, Curry and her family quickly attributed the presence of fentanyl to Eric's supposed recreational drug use. Curry explained that Eric took a THC-infused gummy each night to relax, as he preferred THC, the psychoactive compound in cannabis, to unwind. However, Curry, her mother, and her brothers voiced concerns about where these gummies came from, suspecting that Eric may not have purchased them from legitimate sources and instead obtained them illegally. Eric's family firmly rejected these claims, convinced there was more to the story, and urged investigators to look deeper into the circumstances. Despite her attempts to move forward, Curry faced major challenges, according to her brother Ronnie, as the loss of their husband and father left an enormous void in their lives, causing their 3 sons to act out amid the uncertainty surrounding Eric's death. Curry, grieving and seeking solace for her children, turned to a creative outlet to manage her emotions. She wrote and self-published a children's book on Amazon titled Are You With Me?, which aimed to help children comprehend and cope with the loss of a loved one. The book narrates the story of a young boy grappling with his father's death through illustrations and storytelling. In the story, Curry depicted Eric, her late husband, as a guardian angel constantly watching over their son. Her mother Lisa commended the book, stating it provided some comfort to Curry and her grandchildren as they processed their feelings and began rebuilding their lives. However, detectives investigating Eric's death soon discovered evidence pointing toward foul play. Only weeks after Curry appeared on local Utah news outlets promoting her book and publicly expressing her grief, she was arrested and charged with her husband's murder on May 8, 2023. The community was left shocked by the arrest, and the tragic turn of events transformed what once seemed like an inspiring story of a mourning wife and mother into a startling narrative of betrayal and tragedy. Curry stands accused of murdering Eric by poisoning him. Eric's relatives believe Curry intentionally added a lethal dose of fentanyl to the Moscow mule she had prepared for him on the night of his death. Nonetheless, Curry's defense attorney contends that no fentanyl residue was discovered in the drinking glasses at their residence. Curry firmly denies any participation in Eric's death, asserting she had no motive to harm him. Her mother, Lisa, was stunned by the accusations against her daughter and told investigators the couple appeared happy and had no reason to harm one another. But as detectives delved further, they uncovered that Curry and Eric's relationship was not as ideal as it appeared. The pair often argued, and Curry, who had left her career to become a stay-at-home mother, wished to regain her independence. She also grew increasingly annoyed with Eric's frequent hunting excursions. According to Lisa, Eric was unfaithful in their marriage and confided about the affair to both her and Curry. To mend their marital issues, Eric and Curry pursued counseling. Nevertheless, Eric's family refuted the claims of infidelity, maintaining that he truly loved his sons and was determined to preserve the marriage. Despite those efforts, Eric was secretly preparing for a possible divorce. He created a private trust with his sister Katie without disclosing his intentions. The investigation revealed that Eric held 6 life insurance policies totaling $3 million. Additionally, it was uncovered that Eric's signature had been forged on another $100,000 policy merely 2 months before his death. Investigators also discovered that Curry had allegedly taken money from Eric's personal accounts and misappropriated business funds over several years. Contrary to her statements, Curry's house flipping company was reportedly failing, according to Eric's family representative. Curry's firm was heavily indebted, owing millions of dollars. The spokesperson claimed Curry was in urgent need of cash, and a prenuptial agreement signed before the marriage specified that she would not receive business assets in the event of a divorce. However, if Eric were to die before her during their marriage, the assets would transfer to Curry. The spokesperson's assertions were challenged by Curry's attorney, who maintained that the business was financially stable and not in distress. The attorney explained that the debt was a normal aspect of the house flipping business, as it depended on lines of credit that would be repaid once the renovated properties were sold. Curry's attorney emphasized that the substantial debt amount mentioned was simply the outcome of standard business transactions. Curry's mother, Lisa, remembered that Eric had been encouraging of Curry's entrepreneurial efforts, particularly when they purchased the mansion where the couple had been celebrating on the night of his death. In Heba Valley, Utah, a 10-acre property with a mansion had stood vacant since its completion in 2017, despite being situated near popular ski resorts and Deer Creek Reservoir. This prime setting offered unlimited outdoor recreation potential. With assistance from investors, Curry bought the mansion intending to renovate it and transform it into a recreational retreat. Her objective was to sell the property later at a considerable profit. After consulting an accountant, Eric and Curry discovered that they could potentially earn a $12 million profit from the property's sale, representing a major return on their initial $3 million investment. However, there was a discrepancy concerning Eric's involvement. Although he appeared to approve of the purchase, his family contended that he opposed it and had a heated dispute with Curry regarding the mansion's acquisition. Eric's family spokesperson alleged that Curry gave Eric a fentanyl-laced drink on the night of his death and claimed that this was not her first attempt to harm him. They asserted that in 2019, during a trip to Greece, Eric became violently ill after Curry served him a drink. Yet, Curry's brother Ronnie refuted this allegation, explaining that Eric had mistakenly been given an alcoholic beverage by a bartender while taking antibiotics. Eric's family further alleged that Curry made another attempt to kill Eric on Valentine's Day in 2022, 1 month before his death, when she brought him a sandwich that caused him to break out in hives and experience breathing difficulties. Following Eric's death, Curry's behavior drew additional scrutiny, including an incident where she reportedly assaulted her sister Amy after Amy tried to open a safe containing a large amount of cash. Curry insisted she acted in self-defense while trying to retrieve vital documents, but was ultimately charged with assault and pleaded no contest in June 2023. Curry appeared in court for a 4-hour bail hearing during which her attorney sought to persuade the judge to grant her release. Prosecutors introduced 3 witnesses and supporting evidence to argue that Curry had fatally poisoned her husband. One of the witnesses, a cell phone expert, testified regarding Google searches located on Curry's phone, which included phrases like retrieving deleted iPhone messages, FBI's ability to recover deleted messages, and lethal dose of fentanyl. However, Curry's attorney countered that these searches occurred after her husband's death, while she was attempting to understand the accusations against her. Meanwhile, prosecutors questioned the lead detective about possible ways Curry might have obtained the drugs that killed Eric. According to the detective, a woman named Carmen Laba, who claimed she worked as a cleaner for Curry's business and home, informed investigators about a conversation that occurred in early 2022. During that call, Curry allegedly asked Carmen to purchase fentanyl pills for an investor suffering from a back injury. Carmen, who had a background of drug-related offenses and was on probation, agreed to the request. She later informed detectives that she had purchased between 15 and 30 fentanyl pills and then met with Curry to exchange them for cash. This transaction took place on February 11, 2022, just 3 days before Valentine's Day. Around this same period, court documents indicated that Curry had allegedly attempted to poison Eric with a sandwich. Carmen further stated that Curry contacted her again, seeking even stronger drugs. This time, she said, Curry compensated her with a check. Specifically, Carmen claimed that Curry wrote her a check for $1,300 approximately 1 week after Eric's death. However, Curry's attorney raised doubts, suggesting that the check might have been payment for cleaning services instead, a possibility the detective conceded. Curry's lawyer sought to discredit Carmen's testimony by emphasizing her criminal record, which included 4 first-degree felonies, and arguing that she was not a reliable witness. The attorney contended that Carmen could have been coerced into admitting to selling drugs in order to avoid a lengthy prison term, since the detective had allegedly warned her of severe repercussions if she refused to cooperate. The lawyer also inquired whether any physical proof existed showing that Carmen had purchased drugs. The detective acknowledged that no text messages were found in which Curry asked Carmen for drugs, and no witnesses confirmed witnessing the alleged exchange. During the bail hearing, Eric's sister addressed the judge, expressing the family's anguish over Eric's death and their fear that releasing Curry on bail would cause them additional pain. Eric's sister pleaded with the judge to keep Curry in custody, and the judge granted her request. Meanwhile, Curry's family was distressed because she was not permitted to leave jail prior to her trial and was required to remain incarcerated. They believed that her confinement was negatively affecting her mental and physical well-being. In 2023, a serious incident occurred while Curry was taking medication administered by jail officials. She suffered a seizure and was promptly transported to a hospital from the jail. While hospitalized, Curry claimed that officials had given her the wrong medication, which triggered adverse effects. Thankfully, she recovered after receiving medical care. During her hospital stay, jail authorities discovered a handwritten, unsent letter in her cell. They submitted it into court records, asserting that it was a note written by Curry to her mother. Prosecutors argued that this letter offered further insight into Carey's alleged intentions and motives. In November 2023, they filed a motion requesting a no-contact order to limit Carey's communication with her mother and brothers. Relying mainly on the letter, prosecutors alleged that it served as evidence of witness tampering. They claimed the letter instructed Carey's mother on how her brother Ronnie should testify during the trial. According to the prosecution, Curry wanted Ronnie to assert that Eric had admitted to obtaining pain pills containing fentanyl from Mexico during his travels abroad. The letter also directed Ronnie to gather text messages from Eric discussing drug use. Curry emphasized the importance of connecting Eric's trip to Mexico with his supposed drug involvement. Nevertheless, she firmly denied that the letter was an effort to influence witnesses, insisting it was merely a fictional story she had written. The judge ruled in her favor, as prosecutors were unable to substantiate the witness tampering claim. At present, Eric's family and Curry's family are engaged in a custody battle over the couple's 3 sons, who are currently living with one of Eric's relatives. Although Curry remains incarcerated, she continues to communicate with her sons through twice-weekly video calls. While her family is not permitted private visits with the children, they frequently attend the boys' sporting events and practices, which are open to the public. If found guilty of killing her husband Eric with fentanyl, Curry faces a potential sentence of 25 years to life in prison. Multiple civil lawsuits have also been filed against Curry, all pertaining to Eric's estate. A central issue in these cases is the custody of Eric's children. Eric's family believes that Curry's relatives are driven by a desire to control Eric's assets, as obtaining custody of the children would grant them access to his wealth. Curry's trial is set to commence in 2025. Moving on to the next case. Jamie Hahn. Jamie Hahn was born on October 25, 1983. Growing up in Orangeburg, South Carolina, she lived with her 2 brothers and her sister, Brett, Justin, and Ashley. Despite her parents' divorce and subsequent remarriage, Jamie remained a cheerful and positive child. She attended a small but distinguished private preparatory school known for its academic excellence. During junior high, Jamie visited the University of North Carolina with her classmates. She immediately fell in love with the campus and aspired to study there. Even as a young student, she sought to make a difference in others' lives by joining the board of the Center of Hope, an organization that supported troubled teens. Later, she became involved in various political campaigns. One of the most notable was Senator John Edwards' 2008 presidential campaign, during which he competed against Barack Obama. Through this experience, Jamie rose to prominence within North Carolina's Democratic Party. During one campaign, she met Nation, and their strong professional relationship gradually developed from friendship into romance. 4 months after their first romantic encounter, they announced their engagement and were married on April 18, 2009. Their profound love was grounded in a deep friendship. Jamie and Nation flourished in their respective professional pursuits. Jamie managed her own political fundraising consulting company, while Nation was a respected online strategist assisting politicians and nonprofit organizations with their campaigns. Friends and acquaintances described the couple as remarkably kind, gentle, and generous, earning them widespread admiration. They took their wedding vows to heart and actively engaged in initiatives such as the Coalition to Protect Young Families in North Carolina. Although they did not yet have children, Jamie and Nation planned to start a family soon. They both maintained lively social circles. Jamie was known among her friends and family for her compassion and her remarkable ability to bring joy to those around her. Her passion and aptitude for politics led many to anticipate a bright and successful future for her. However, without warning, their seemingly perfect life collapsed on April 22, 2013. At approximately 5:20 p.m., Jamie ran frantically from her home and managed to sprint several meters before collapsing unconscious in a neighbor's yard. Her body was soaked in blood. Witnesses on the street were horrified by the sight and screamed for someone to call 911. A neighbor who witnessed the chaos unfolding in his yard immediately contacted emergency services. From Jamie's disoriented words, he gathered that a man named John, who appeared to still be inside her home, had attacked her with a knife. Acting quickly, he pressed a towel against the multiple wounds in her abdomen and urgently called for an ambulance and the police. When patrol officers arrived, they followed the blood trail from the neighbor's yard back to the Hahn residence. Surrounding the house, the officers ordered the person inside to come out with his hands raised. Moments later, a disheveled bald man appeared on the porch. Officers observed that he had cuts on his wrists and a stab wound in his abdomen. Due to his injuries, the unidentified man was transported by ambulance to the hospital, accompanied by a police officer. On the way to the hospital, the wounded man became distraught and emotional, expressing remorse that the incident had not happened sooner and repeatedly saying that he wished to die. After he received medical attention, investigators sought to determine his identity, his reason for being in the Hahn residence, and the circumstances surrounding the brutal attack. They soon learned that he was 31-year-old Jonathan Wayne Broyhill, a close friend of Nation and a guest staying in their home. Jamie also knew John well. She had hired him as an accountant at her political consulting firm after he moved to North Carolina. The couple had kindly offered him a place to stay in their home until he could secure his own accommodation. Nation and John came from the same hometown and first met in 2000 during a church trip. Despite a 4-year age difference, they quickly developed a close friendship. As often happens with childhood friends, they drifted apart when one left for college, but reconnected after graduation. From then on, they became almost inseparable. Jonathan was even given the honor of serving as best man at Nation and Jamie's wedding. By April 2009, the trio had grown so close that they were often compared to the Three Musketeers, living by the motto, one for all and all for one. They took vacations together, shared their traditional Monday dinners, and celebrated holidays side by side. To many neighbors, Jonathan seemed like an extension of the Hahn family, given how much time he spent at their residence. This profound and seemingly indestructible friendship makes the violent episode that left all three of them with stab wounds inside their own home even more bewildering and tragic. Every Monday, Jamie and Nation hosted their mutual friend Jonathan for dinner. On that particular evening, Broyhill arrived earlier than usual, hoping to discuss recent campaign matters with Jamie. The couple had been deeply worried about John's well-being since he had confided in them about his diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, an extremely aggressive and often fatal illness. The Hahns, being compassionate by nature, accompanied Jonathan to his doctor's appointments and were always by his side, offering every bit of support possible in his difficult struggle for survival. On one occasion, Jamie, overcome with emotion, asked Nation whether they should consider having a baby soon so that their future child could know Jonathan. Such was their deep affection and respect for their friend. They genuinely wished for even their unborn child to have the chance to form a bond with him. The cancer diagnosis had been a crushing blow, but it was not the first health crisis Broyhill had endured. Over the years, John had faced several hospital stays. He had once confided to Nation that he had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis during a gallbladder surgery. As a result, the Hahns invited Jonathan to live with them temporarily, offering care and companionship until his condition improved. On that ill-fated Monday, Jamie and Jonathan were already in the kitchen engaged in work discussions when Nation arrived home and went upstairs to change. Suddenly, Nation was startled by Jamie's screams, shouting both his and John's names. Believing that Broyhill might have fallen ill due to his health problems, Nation hurried downstairs midway. He was met by Jamie's terrified cries, yelling that someone was trying to stab her. Rushing into the kitchen, Nation was horrified to find his wife lying on the floor, bleeding heavily. John stood above her, brandishing a large kitchen knife. As Broyhill began advancing toward Nation, the knife raised menacingly. Nation stood frozen in disbelief. How could such a nightmare unfold within mere minutes? In a desperate act of self-defense, Nation grasped the knife blade with one hand while striking John in the face with the other. Amid the chaos, he frantically urged Jamie to run for her life, struggling to restrain a man who only moments earlier had been his dearest friend. It felt utterly surreal. Despite her severe injuries, Jamie somehow found the strength to rise from the floor and escape through the side door of their house. Once she was outside, Nation, fighting through shock and confusion, shoved Jonathan aside and rushed after his wife. Outside, Jamie desperately sought help at the nearest neighbor's home, pounding on the door for assistance. Sadly, no one responded to her desperate knocking. Summoning her final reserves of strength, she staggered toward the next house, but collapsed unconscious in the yard, her body succumbing to the magnitude of her wounds. Drawn by the screams and commotion, passers-by quickly rushed to her aid while a neighbor called for both an ambulance and the police. Meanwhile, Nation, panicked and distraught, searched frantically for Jamie. Following the trail of blood, he discovered her in a neighbor's yard. She was still conscious but in excruciating pain, clutching her side. Kneeling beside her, he took her hand and tried to comfort her, whispering promises of recovery, of future anniversaries, and of vacations by the sea, though tears streamed uncontrollably down his face. As he spoke, holding Jamie's trembling hand, Nation was consumed by thoughts of life without her, unable to comprehend how their once peaceful existence had descended into such horror. While they awaited help, a neighbor hurried over with a towel to press against Jamie's bleeding abdomen. Tragically, the towel was quickly saturated with blood. Another compassionate neighbor lifted Jamie's legs onto a bag filled with leaves, hoping to offer some small relief. The ambulance was on its way, yet to those waiting, every passing second felt endless. Though it was only a matter of minutes, Jamie's breathing grew shallow and uneven, a clear sign of her deteriorating state. When paramedics finally arrived, they immediately began administering life-saving measures. Nation, who had sustained deep lacerations to his hand while struggling with the knife, was also in dire need of medical attention. Both he and Jamie were rushed to the hospital. During the frantic transport, Jamie lost consciousness, and upon arrival, she was taken straight into emergency surgery. Meanwhile, Nation, despite his own injuries, was consumed entirely by worry for his wife and oblivious to his pain as he received stitches. In his shock and desperation, he repeatedly attempted to enter the ICU, pleading for any information about Jamie, but was denied entry. Sitting anxiously on a hospital bed, Nation was tormented by the thought of Jamie's suffering. She had endured more than a dozen stab wounds, a severed artery, and extensive liver damage. His only solace in those agonizing moments was the fragile hope that she might survive. For a brief time, it seemed like a miracle. Jamie initially survived the surgery, but that hope was heartbreakingly short-lived. She never regained consciousness. 2 days after the horrific attack, Jamie succumbed to her injuries. The autopsy revealed a grim reality. She had sustained 24 stab wounds across multiple areas of her body, including her face, neck, back, hands, and forearms. However, the most fatal injuries were those to her chest and abdomen, which caused devastating damage to her lungs and liver. Meanwhile, Jonathan Brill had inflicted wounds upon himself and was hospitalized for 8 days to recover from those self-inflicted injuries. On Tuesday, April 30th, 2013, still in need of medical care and with both wrists heavily bandaged, Brill was transported on a stretcher to the magistrate's office in Wake County. He was formally charged with first-degree murder in the case of Jamie Hahn and with assault with a deadly weapon on Nation Hahn. Owing to the gravity of the charges, he was denied bail and held at Central Prison in Raleigh. This particular facility was chosen because it contained a hospital unit, ensuring that Brill would continue to receive the medical treatment he required while in custody for his crimes. The devastating and abrupt loss of Jamie left a profound impact on countless people, with one haunting question lingering. Why would someone she regarded as one of her closest friends commit such an atrocious act, depriving her of her future? In the aftermath of the tragedy, speculation began to circulate within the community about a substantial sum of money that had gone missing during an election campaign managed by Jamie's team. Jonathan Brill, who had served as the campaign's accountant, had officially ended his employment with the company at the close of 2012. Nevertheless, he continued to provide Jamie with financial details and assist in the preparation of financial reports. It was suspected that Jamie may have uncovered the missing funds, amounting to more than $50,000, and confronted Jonathan about the discrepancy. This confrontation may have provoked the violent outburst that led to her death. On April 22, 2013, Jamie had invited Jonathan over for their customary Monday dinner and planned to address the financial irregularities within the company. The precise sequence of events during Nation's brief absence upstairs remains uncertain. However, it is widely believed that Jamie confronted Jonathan about the missing money during that time. As time went on, Nation's physical wounds gradually healed, but the emotional and psychological scars endured, deep, raw, and unhealing. 6 months after the tragedy, Jamie's family and her heartbroken husband scattered her ashes near Pulaski Memorial Baptist Church, a place that held deep meaning to her, as she had devoted much of her time there as a volunteer. In a tragic twist of fate, merely a week before the horrific event, the Hahns had asked the church's pastor to pray for Jonathan, believing he was fighting cancer. Could they have ever imagined that soon it would be they who would need the prayers of their community in the aftermath of such an incomprehensible loss? Nation was forced to confront the unbearable reality that the person he had known since childhood, the friend he trusted above all others, had destroyed his world and taken the life of the woman he cherished more than anything. To Nation, Jamie was his anchor, his strength, and his soulmate. He could not comprehend how the sun could continue to shine without her. The trial of Jonathan Brill began on March 4, 2015. During proceedings, the district attorney revealed to the jury that Jonathan, while serving as Jamie's financial manager, had written 39 checks to himself, embezzling approximately $50,000, the exact amount missing from the campaign's accounts. To rationalize his actions, Brill claimed to suffer from numerous health problems, including brain damage caused by multiple sclerosis, memory loss, a gallbladder operation, and pancreatic cancer. Compassionate as ever, Jamie chose not to confront John about such a sensitive issue during what she believed to be his time of great suffering. She delicately avoided the topic, hoping that Brill would recognize his mistake and correct it on his own. Everything appeared normal until she received a call from a debt collector. Then, during the trial, the district attorney revealed a shocking truth. The defendant's first hospitalization the previous year had occurred after an incident at the Hahns' home. Before that, Jonathan had never sought any medical treatment whatsoever, as confirmed by his health records. It became evident that he had deceived Jamie and Nation entirely about his medical conditions. There had been no gallbladder surgery, no multiple sclerosis, and no cancer. Only a fabricated tale masking a deep psychological disturbance. A search of Jonathan's online history revealed that he had been researching pancreatic cancer and specialists in that field, clearly to lend authenticity to his lies. He had also looked up cruises that did not require a passport and even booked a one-way flight to Las Vegas for April 23rd, which he canceled on the 22nd, just 2 hours before attacking Jamie with a knife. Jonathan later admitted to authorities that he had indeed embezzled the campaign funds and fabricated all his medical ailments. Whenever the Hahns accompanied him to supposed medical appointments, waiting patiently in the car like caring friends, he simply wandered the hospital corridors. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Jonathan struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts. He confessed that he heard voices commanding him to harm others. He had purchased the knife with the intention of using it in Las Vegas to end his life. However, he believed Jamie was going to confront him about the missing money, and when she did, he began stabbing himself. Jamie tried to stop him, but in a state of rage and confusion, he turned on her and attacked her impulsively. Jonathan later admitted to the assault, but claimed that parts of the ordeal were erased from his memory. Both he and his attorney knew that dismissing the charges entirely was impossible, given the overwhelming evidence of guilt. Nevertheless, they sought to argue for temporary insanity in hopes of reducing his sentence. Before the jury began deliberations, Nation Hahn was given an opportunity to speak. With a voice heavy with grief, he said, "We lock our doors at night to keep out the evil of the world, but it's terrifying to realize what happens when evil holds the key." He directed these words toward the man who had once been his best friend. On March 19, 2015, the jury reached its verdict. Jonathan Brill was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Jamie Hahn and the attempted murder of Nation Hahn. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jamie's intentions had been nothing but pure, and her death was so utterly senseless that even Jonathan later admitted in an interview that if he had simply been honest with the Hahns, she would have forgiven him. In an instant, their dearest friend had become their greatest nightmare. This tragedy defies all logic and understanding. Moving on to the next case. Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown, born in 1979, radiated positivity and warmth, profoundly influencing those around her. Her numerous pursuits often left friends and family wondering how she managed everything, but her greatest passion was motherhood. Caring for her son, Noah, never diminished her spirit. Instead, it strengthened her resolve, especially after Noah was diagnosed with autism as a child. As she nurtured him, Jennifer became his anchor and closest companion. They spent countless hours together, sharing joyful moments and supporting each other through life's challenges. Their heartwarming relationship inspired tenderness and admiration from everyone who knew them. The small town cherished this family for their sincerity and cheerful demeanor. Tragedy struck without warning on January 3, 2023, when Jennifer disappeared without leaving any trace behind. On January 4, 2023, Antonio Blair Watts Richardson contacted the Limerick Township Police Department, deeply troubled by the sudden disappearance of his close friend Jennifer. Although less than 24 hours had passed since he had last seen or heard from her, Antonio's concern was intensifying by the minute. Despite repeated attempts, he could not reach Jennifer, which was extremely unusual because she was always responsive, especially regarding her son Noah. Jennifer's friends and family knew her as a devoted mother and compassionate person, making her unexplained absence deeply alarming. Antonio's call to the police launched an extensive and mysterious investigation. A large-scale search operation commenced, involving police officers, friends, and family, all determined to uncover clues about Jennifer's disappearance. The question haunting everyone was what could have possibly caused Jennifer to leave her beloved son without any explanation. At approximately 4 p.m., Officer Stephen Crawford of the Limerick Township Police Department arrived at the Brown family residence to assess the situation. He noticed Jennifer's vehicle parked near the porch. Upon entering the home, he found her keys, purse, tablet, and work phone all inside. However, Jennifer's personal cell phone was missing. When investigators attempted to track it, they discovered it had been switched off at 7 a.m. on January 4th, and its signal could not be traced afterward. The last known location of the phone was near the intersection of Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick. This discovery provided the first significant lead in the investigation and suggested that something troubling had occurred. Consequently, Jennifer was officially declared missing, prompting authorities to begin a formal investigation. Detectives interviewed Jennifer's relatives, friends, and neighbors, but none could offer any insight into her disappearance. Her loved ones, including her Aunt Diane Bram and friends Tiffany Barron and Antonio, insisted that Jennifer would never voluntarily leave her son. As a devoted mother, she would never abandon her child. Despite relentless efforts, no leads emerged in Jennifer's case. Her family made public appeals and offered a reward for information, but nothing surfaced, leaving only unanswered questions and mounting fear. The investigation began to center on the events of that day, focusing on Jennifer's close friend Antonio, the last person known to have seen her alive. On what appeared to be an ordinary January day, Jennifer and Antonio spent time together in the living room, talking about life, their future plans, and their children. Since their kids often played together, Jennifer asked Antonio to pick up her son Noah from school. Antonio agreed and went to the school to get him. However, the following day, Noah's behavior at school caused concern among his teachers. They observed that he had missed 2 doses of his medication, which was highly unusual given Jennifer's consistent attentiveness to her son's condition. She always kept the teachers updated on Noah's health and any issues that arose in school. The school staff became worried when they were unable to reach Jennifer. Noah told them that his mother had gone to the grocery store but had not returned. Jennifer would never leave her son alone under any circumstances. Antonio also attempted to contact her but was unable to reach her. He subsequently reported her missing to the police. As the investigation progressed, no new clues about Jennifer's whereabouts surfaced. Hope for her safe return gradually faded with each passing day. It appeared as though she had vanished without a trace and might never be found. However, on January 18th, 2 weeks after her disappearance was reported, 2 warehouse workers in nearby Limerick Township made a shocking discovery. While stepping outside the building to get coffee, they noticed what appeared to be a freshly dug hole. Upon closer examination, they were horrified to discover a woman's body buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately alerted the authorities, who quickly arrived at the scene. The remains were soon identified as those of Jennifer Brown, who had been missing for 2 weeks. The sheriff informed Jennifer's family that her body had been found partially buried near a warehouse in Roseford. An autopsy later revealed that Jennifer's cause of death was asphyxiation, and 3 broken ribs indicated that she had engaged in a violent struggle with her attacker. The case swiftly transitioned from a missing person investigation to a homicide inquiry. Detectives re-interviewed Jennifer's family and friends, but those conversations yielded no new insights. The investigation appeared to have reached a dead end, with no suspects identified. Just as the case seemed to stall, an unexpected lead emerged from an unanticipated source. After Jennifer's disappearance and subsequent murder became public, the police urged anyone with potentially relevant information to come forward. Noah's teacher responded to the appeal. She recalled an incident that initially appeared insignificant, but took on new meaning after learning of Jennifer's death. The teacher reported that Noah had shared an important detail about the day his mother disappeared. According to Noah, when Antonio picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, he saw his mother's personal cell phone among Antonio's belongings. Noah recognized it immediately because the lock screen displayed a photo of him as a child. This revelation proved to be a crucial breakthrough in Jennifer's murder investigation. Previously, investigators had believed that Jennifer's killer had taken her phone. Now, Antonio emerged as the primary suspect. Detectives began delving deeper into the nature of Jennifer and Antonio's relationship, uncovering startling new details. At first, Jennifer and Antonio's friendship seemed strong and long-lasting. They spent a considerable amount of time together, knew each other well, and their families often socialized. However, once the financial arrangement between them came to light, an arrangement hidden beneath their apparently friendly relationship, things began to unravel. Antonio owned a restaurant called Bird's Kitchen, which had declined and eventually closed in early 2022. Following this, Antonio turned to Jennifer for assistance in August 2022. Wanting to support her friend, Jennifer chose to invest in Antonio's business, helping him reopen Bird's Kitchen at a new location. They signed a contract stating that Jennifer would provide regular financial support to sustain the restaurant, making payments roughly every 6 weeks. In total, Jennifer gave Antonio about $36,000 from August to January to rebuild Bird's Kitchen. They also agreed that she would provide him with another $99,000. Antonio was expected to secure a new property, pay rent, sign the lease, and reopen the restaurant in January 2023. However, Antonio used the money for personal expenses rather than for business purposes. As a result, the property owners canceled their agreement with him on December 26, 2022, after he failed to meet his financial obligations. This placed Antonio in a difficult position, leaving him without both the money and the chance to reopen the restaurant. Police suspected that Antonio might have committed a crime to rescue himself from financial ruin. Upon examining Jennifer's iPad, investigators found 2 unauthorized money transfers totaling $177,000 made to Bird's Kitchen on January 3rd. These transfers were not part of Jennifer and Antonio's agreement, and they initially failed because of 2-factor authentication, which was later disabled. This discovery further implicated Antonio in Jennifer's murder. Detectives then interviewed the landlords of the property where Antonio had been living, whose lease with him had recently been terminated. Strangely, on January 4th, the same day Antonio reported Jennifer missing, he met with them, claiming he now had the funds to sign a new lease. This made investigators more certain that Antonio was likely the killer, though they knew obtaining a confession would be difficult. They needed solid evidence to establish his guilt. To collect more information, investigators questioned Antonio's wife, Tiara Taylor, about his whereabouts on the day Jennifer disappeared. Tiara said that Antonio visited the Brown home around 1 p.m. on January 3rd and did not return until 4:30 a.m. the next morning, when he picked Noah up from the bus stop. She also mentioned that Antonio came home briefly, then left again around 5 p.m., not returning until late that night. This timeline became a key focal point of the investigation. Further inquiries revealed that Antonio spent the night with his mistress, Tatiana Garrett, but did not arrive at her home until 8 p.m., leaving a 3-hour gap in his alibi. Based on the evidence gathered, detectives reconstructed the likely sequence of events surrounding the murder. According to their findings, Antonio went to Jennifer's home around 1 p.m. on January 3rd and allegedly killed her while Noah was still at school. He then transferred funds from Jennifer's iPad to his own account before leaving to pick up Noah from the bus stop around 4 p.m. Later, he returned to Jennifer's house, dropped Noah off, and went back to dispose of Jennifer's body. He buried her in a shallow grave in a field near Roseford. Afterward, he drove to Tatiana's house and spent the night there. Everything seemed meticulously planned, but one fatal mistake exposed him, allowing Noah to see his mother's cell phone. The police had gathered enough evidence to secure a conviction, yet they continued their investigation to conclusively establish Antonio's guilt. This phase of the investigation involved film experts and a specially trained dog capable of detecting cadaveric odors indoors. First, the dog was brought to Jennifer's home to become familiar with her scent. This was the same location where the crime had occurred, in her kitchen. The police then guided the dog to Antonio's car, where it instantly detected the same scent. This final piece of evidence confirmed detectives' suspicions about Antonio's involvement in the murder. After several months of investigation, Antonio was arrested on February 8th and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently being held at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without bail, awaiting a preliminary hearing where he will stand trial for his alleged crimes. Jennifer's family and friends were heartbroken by her death, especially because the perpetrator was someone they had trusted. With the killer finally brought to justice, the case was closed. The boys' observation of the killer's mistake played a vital role in uncovering the truth and ensuring that the murderer was held accountable. The tragic events in Limerick Township serve as a stark reminder that even the most carefully planned crimes will ultimately be exposed. Cruel and inhumane acts do not go unpunished, and those responsible will inevitably face justice. Moving on to the next case. Mike Williams. It was a calm, cold morning on Lake Seminole. Mike Williams, a devoted father and skilled hunter, left home before dawn to go duck hunting, something he had done countless times before. But that day he never returned. Later, his boat was discovered. His equipment was still inside. Yet Mike himself was missing. At first, everyone believed it had been a tragic accident, but as time went on, the details no longer made sense. Whispers began to circulate about hidden truths, deception, and something far more sinister. This was not just an ordinary disappearance. It was the start of a mystery full of twists no one could have predicted. Jerry Michael Williams, commonly known as Michael or simply Mike, was born on October 16, 1969. He grew up in the rural community of Bradfordville, situated in Leon County, just north of Tallahassee, the capital of Florida. Mike came from humble beginnings. His father worked as a Greyhound bus driver, while his mother operated a daycare service. Together, they raised Mike and his older brother Nick in a trailer, choosing not to build a house so they could save enough money to send their sons to the private North Florida Christian school in Tallahassee. Mike worked part-time at night in local supermarkets to help support the family, and he excelled in school. He took part in many extracurricular activities, including playing football, serving as student council president, and participating in the Key Club, a student-run service organization. He was well-liked among his classmates, who voted him best personality. Around the age of 15, he developed a deep love for duck hunting, a passion that would stay with him for the rest of his life. At North Florida Christian, Mike met Denise Merrill, who would later become his wife. Denise was a cheerleader for the school's football team, the North Florida Eagles, and was also voted best dressed in their class of 1988 yearbook. During their school years, Mike also became close friends with Brian Winchester and Katie Aldrich. Like Denise, Katie was a cheerleader, while Brian was active in the Key Club. In fact, Mike and Brian's senior portraits appeared side by side in the yearbook. These friendships continued long after graduation. By 1994, both couples had married. After high school, Mike attended Florida State University, where he earned a degree in political science and urban planning. Even before graduating, he was hired by Ketchum Appraisal Group as a property appraiser, quickly building a reputation as the company's hardest-working employee. In 1999, 5 years after marrying Denise, the couple welcomed their only child. Mike was known for being deeply committed both to his family and his career. Tragically, his father passed away in 2000, bringing emotional hardship during an already difficult period. That same year, Mike and Denise obtained a life insurance policy valued at nearly $2 million. The policy was arranged by Brian, who by then worked in financial services and had become Mike's closest friend. By that time, Mike and Denise's marriage had already started to decline. Mike had grown dissatisfied with several aspects of his life. He was unfulfilled at work, mourning his father's death, and longing for a second child, a dream he believed Denise no longer shared. He grew worried when money began vanishing from their accounts, leading him to seek guidance from his mother-in-law. Mike feared that Denise might be concealing something, possibly an affair or a drug issue. He never received a clear explanation. In an effort to mend their troubled relationship, Mike arranged a romantic spring vacation to Hawaii, hoping it could serve as a second honeymoon and an opportunity to grow their family. Yet Denise, deeply devoted to her public image and Christian principles, never considered divorce an option, mainly out of fear of losing custody of their daughter. In the months leading up to that planned spring trip, Mike and Denise had arranged a more immediate getaway to celebrate their 6th wedding anniversary. They intended to spend the evening of December 16, 2000, in Apalachicola, a small coastal town in Florida. Mike believed it would be the perfect moment to restore their connection. Before sunrise on that same December morning, Mike departed alone for a duck hunting expedition, his favorite hobby. He left in his gold 1994 Ford Bronco, towing his boat and heading toward Lake Seminole. Located in the southeastern corner of Georgia along the Florida border, the lake is maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Covering an area of 152 square kilometers and featuring over 600 kilometers of shoreline, the lake is supplied by 3 rivers, Chattahoochee, Flint, and Spring Creek, which converge to form the Apalachicola River. It is home to a variety of fish species, including largemouth bass, crappie, chain pickerel, catfish, and striped bass. The waters of Lake Seminole host not only fish but also a wide range of wildlife, including American crocodiles, water snakes, and numerous aquatic birds. It is a popular destination for duck hunters throughout the region. When Mike failed to return home by noon, Denise contacted her father. Together, they notified authorities, and the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission promptly initiated a search and rescue operation, initially classifying it as a missing hunter case. However, due to an approaching storm, the mission was soon suspended. Mike's boat was later spotted by helicopter near the launch ramp. The pilot at first assumed the boat belonged to the rescue team. Inside, investigators discovered Mike's shotgun still secured in its case, but there was no sign of Mike himself. The prevailing theory suggested that Mike's boat might have struck a submerged tree stump, causing him to fall overboard and drown in the waters. If that were true, his body should have surfaced within days. Yet weeks went by without a trace. Mike became the only person among more than 80 known drowning victims in Lake Seminole whose body had never been recovered. One grim possibility proposed by a search company was that alligators had devoured Mike's body, dragging the remains to an inaccessible location. However, that explanation didn't seem to make sense. Alligators generally don't feed during winter, especially not in the freezing temperatures recorded in December 2000. Daytime highs averaged only 3 degrees Celsius, while nighttime lows dropped below freezing. The water temperature hovered near 14 degrees Celsius, cold enough that rescue teams had to build fires along the shoreline just to stay warm. In such conditions, alligators become lethargic, focusing on conserving body heat rather than hunting. Even if, against all odds, a gator had attacked Mike, there should have been some trace, remains, clothing, bones, or anything. Could a single alligator really have consumed a grown man without leaving evidence? 6 months later, in June 2001, a fisherman in the Stump Field area of Lake Seminole discovered a pair of wading birds floating on the water's surface. Authorities responded, and divers thoroughly searched the area. From the lakebed, they recovered a lightweight hunting jacket, a flashlight, and a pair of waterproof waders. Inside the jacket was a hunting license bearing Mike's name and signature. Yet curiously, none of the items displayed bite marks, damage, or signs of long-term water exposure. The wading birds were untouched. The flashlight still worked when tested, and the waders raised even more questions. Mike was known to only put them on after reaching his hunting location, never beforehand. 1 week after this peculiar discovery, a Leon County judge approved Denise's petition to have Mike declared legally dead. The official cause, accidental drowning, was supported by the recovered belongings and the theory that aquatic predators had completely consumed his body. This ruling enabled Denise to collect the nearly $2 million life insurance payout from the policy Brian had sold Mike only months earlier. However, Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, remained unconvinced. She believed her son had not drowned and refused to let the matter rest. She persistently contacted law enforcement, urging them to keep investigating. Her tireless determination eventually succeeded. In 2004, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement reopened the case. Although the agency typically doesn't handle missing persons investigations, it assists local authorities, and Cheryl's persistence ensured their involvement. Unfortunately, progress was slow. Few new leads surfaced, and the case began to stagnate. Denise married Brian in 2005. 2 years later, in 2007, they made one of their rare public remarks regarding Mike's disappearance. Speaking to the Tallahassee Democrat, they claimed they had spent the past 7 years praying and hoping to finally uncover what had happened to him. According to them, no one wanted answers more than they did. Yet behind the scenes, suspicions continued to grow. The story of Mike Williams, his disappearance, his death, and everything that followed, was far from over. Thanks to the unwavering determination of Cheryl Williams, a mother who refused to let her son's disappearance fade into obscurity, the case of Mike Williams eventually caught the attention of the cable network investigation Discovery. In 2011, the network aired a segment devoted to Mike's vanishing and the years of unanswered questions that surrounded it. With the arrival of 2012, Cheryl began sending one letter each day to Florida Governor Rick Scott. In every letter, she pleaded with the governor to appoint a new agency or a special prosecutor to reopen her son's case. She sent over 200 letters in total, none of which received a formal response. Later, she discovered that the governor's office had been forwarding her letters unopened to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, where they were merely filed away with the rest of Mike's case materials. That same year, Denise and Brian separated. Brian moved out of their shared home, and in 2016, Denise filed for divorce. Brian did not take the news well. On the day a court-ordered appraisal of their house was set to take place, Brian snapped. As Denise was getting into her car to head to work at Florida State University, Brian, who had been hiding in the back seat, suddenly jumped out. Denise, talking on the phone with her sister, was startled when she saw a figure emerge behind her. Brian seized her phone, shouted instructions, and then brandished a gun. He told Denise that he wasn't there to kill her, but to end his own life. He was overwhelmed by the divorce, his mother's terminal cancer, and the fact that his teenage son had moved in full-time with his ex-wife, Katie. Denise remained calm and managed to talk him down. She convinced him to drive to a nearby park where his truck was parked. There, he retrieved some items from her car, including a mechanic's tool and a bedsheet, before finally letting her go. Denise immediately contacted the police and filed for a protection order, stating that she feared for her life and for the safety of their daughter. Brian was arrested without bail and charged with kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed robbery. In December 2017, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, followed by 15 years of probation. He was also credited for the 502 days he had already spent in custody. Shortly after Brian's sentencing, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement made a shocking announcement. They had found Mike Williams's remains. The discovery had actually occurred 2 months earlier, on October 18, 2017. Search dogs and officers located Mike's body buried under layers of mud and wooden debris at the end of a dead-end road near the same boat ramp where Mike had parked on the day of his disappearance. DNA testing confirmed what Cheryl had always feared. It was Mike. Astonishingly, 98% of his skeleton was recovered in remarkably good condition. He was still wearing his winter gloves and hunting boots, just as he had been that cold December morning in 2000. But how had investigators found him after nearly 17 years? The answer emerged the very next day. On October 19th, Brian Winchester signed a plea deal with prosecutors. In exchange for the state dropping the possibility of a life sentence on the kidnapping charge and withholding certain evidence during sentencing, Brian agreed to reveal the truth. Mike had not gone duck hunting alone that morning. Following behind his gold 1994 Ford Bronco was Brian, driving a white Chevy Suburban. The romantic relationship between Brian and Denise had not begun after Mike's disappearance. It had started years earlier, on October 13, 1997, when they shared their first kiss at a concert while their spouses were parking the car. From that moment, they led double lives, lovers in secret but public friends among their spouses, children, and high school peers. When Denise began feeling trapped in her marriage, particularly as Mike pressured her for a second child, she and Brian started plotting his death. Divorce was never an option for Denise. She feared public disgrace, losing custody of her daughter, and tarnishing her Christian reputation. Together, she and Brian devised several murder plans. One involved staging a boating accident during a group trip, ensuring only Denise and Brian would survive. Brian, however, rejected that idea, unwilling to endanger his wife Katie, who was the mother of his son. So, they revised their plan. Mike and Brian would go hunting alone. A sudden accident would occur, Mike would die, and Denise and Brian would have both the insurance payout and each other. The date was chosen, Saturday, December 9th. Denise stayed home with their 18-month-old daughter and made phone calls to build her alibi. But the plan fell apart when Mike canceled at the last minute. They decided to try again the following weekend. December 16th, 2000. This time, the plan would be carried out. After Mike canceled the initial hunting trip, Denise briefly abandoned the idea of having him killed, but within days she changed her mind. A new date was set, one that felt both symbolic and final, their wedding anniversary. On the night of December 15th, 2000, Brian and his wife Katie arranged for a babysitter to watch their son, Stafford, and went to Floyd's music store to watch a live band. They had a few drinks, and Brian later returned home and fell into a deep sleep. Denise and Brian had agreed to minimize communication in the days leading up to the murder to avoid leaving any trace. Brian even told Mike not to contact him, claiming that his phone was broken. The following morning at Lake Seminole, Mike launched his small boat as usual. According to Brian's later confession, once they were out on the water, he pushed Mike overboard. In a panic, Mike managed to remove his jacket and waterproof waders, struggling desperately to stay afloat. He managed to climb back into the boat, but that wasn't part of the plan. So Brian pulled out a shotgun and shot Mike in the head. He then returned to shore, backed his vehicle down to the water's edge, placed Mike's body in the back, and pushed the boat back into the lake. On his drive home, Brian disassembled the shotgun, which he had purchased from a Florida State University student, and tossed the parts out of his car window along the way. Back at home, he quietly slipped into bed beside Katie, pretending that he had overslept and missed a planned trip with his father. To support his alibi, he later phoned his father to apologize for not showing up. Still with Mike's body in his vehicle, Brian drove to a nearby Walmart on Thomasville Road, where he bought a blue tarp and a shovel. He then drove to a secluded area at the end of Gardner Road, only a few miles from where Mike had grown up, and buried the body roughly 25 inches deep. Acting as though nothing had happened, Brian later joined the search parties for his missing best friend. In the months that followed, he and Denise developed subtle hand signals to communicate when they needed to discuss Mike. They avoided talking inside their homes, instead meeting at public parks such as the Miccosukee Greenway. They believed their phones were tapped and their house under surveillance. Their paranoia became so overwhelming that they would even pat each other down to check for recording devices before speaking. But on their daughter's 19th birthday, Denise's world came crashing down. That day, law enforcement officers arrived at her Florida State University office, handcuffed her, and placed her under arrest for her husband's murder. Just moments before her arrest in 2018, a Leon County grand jury had indicted her on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory to murder. By the end of that year, she was found guilty, and in February 2019, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In 2020, Denise appealed her convictions and achieved partial success. The First District Court of Appeals in Tallahassee overturned her first-degree murder conviction, but upheld her 30-year prison sentence for conspiracy to commit murder. The accessory charge was dismissed after the trial because Florida law prohibits an individual from being convicted of both murder and accessory to the same murder. The appellate judges determined that while Denise had indeed conspired to kill her husband by creating an alibi and persuading him to go hunting, there was insufficient evidence showing that she had explicitly ordered Brian to execute the murder. Denise's defense attorney maintained that Brian was simply a bitter ex-husband who invented his story to gain leniency. Thanks to his plea deal, Brian escaped a life sentence and had the freedom to say whatever he wanted. Katie, Brian's ex-wife, became instrumental in Denise's downfall. Acting as a police informant, she recorded a phone call in which Denise admitted their shared past and acknowledged Brian's love for her. Katie later testified that her suspicions about the affair began in 1999 when Brian claimed he was hunting in Alabama, but left his car parked near Denise's home. She often felt like an outsider whenever she was around them, as though she was intruding on a date. Her doubts were eventually confirmed when she discovered movie ticket stubs in Brian's pockets and a receipt for a locket engraved with Denise's name. Katie and Brian ultimately separated in 2001. After Denise's conviction, her daughter inherited Mike's estate along with the insurance money that had originally gone to Denise. To avoid facing 3 counts of insurance fraud, Denise transferred the funds to her daughter. However, as part of the settlement, the daughter is forbidden from using that money to pay her mother's legal expenses. If she does, she will be required to pay the state a $150,000 penalty. From prison, Brian expressed remorse, claiming the murder tormented him far more than it did Denise, who, according to him, possessed an unsettling ability to live in denial. Denise, meanwhile, has refused all media interviews. Throughout it all, Cheryl Williams, the mother who never gave up, continued keeping the case alive in the public's consciousness. Her relentless determination ultimately brought justice for her son, though the truth came at a devastating cost. In the end, Cheryl's persistence exposed one of Florida's most chilling murder conspiracies, a calculated betrayal that spanned years, shattered lives, and was finally uncovered through the unyielding love of a mother. Moving on to the next case. The case of Sarai Sierra. She crossed the ocean only to meet her death. The high-profile case of an American photographer named Sarai Sierra, which occurred 10 years ago, shocked the world and mobilized the intelligence services of 2 nations situated on different continents. The U.S. citizen mysteriously vanished during her photo tour in Istanbul, disappearing without a trace as though she had evaporated into thin air. This story received widespread media coverage, and the strange nature of the circumstances gave rise to numerous rumors and conspiracy theories. Despite prompt, large-scale, and active search operations, the young woman could not be found alive. Her body was ultimately discovered in the historic heart of the city, near the ancient walls of Sarajevo. But how could it happen that, in broad daylight, in a bustling tourist area, someone's life was taken so easily, and no one even noticed? To comprehend this tragic case, it is essential to reconstruct the full chain of events that led to it, and that is precisely what we will attempt to do now. Sarai Sierra, early years. Sarai Sierra was born in New York on November 9, 1979, becoming the second child in a large family. She was raised alongside her elder brother David and her younger sister Christina. Their parents, Dennis and Bethany Syme Jimenez, were of Puerto Rican heritage but had emigrated to the United States in 1973, settling in Manhattan, where their children were later born. Shortly after the move, the couple joined a local Protestant congregation and became devout evangelical Christians. They raised all their children with strict discipline, adhering closely to the moral and behavioral codes of their adopted faith. The family regularly attended church, actively engaged in the community, and the children participated in Sunday school. Sarai grew up to be an active, creative individual who possessed a determined, yet somewhat complex personality. In contrast to her younger sister Christina, who was quiet, compliant, and deeply modest, Sarai was often viewed as rebellious and mischievous. Nevertheless, she respected her parents and acknowledged their unquestionable authority. In the Jimenez household, there were stringent rules that applied to every family member. These covered the daily routines, household habits, and behavioral norms. For instance, the daughters were prohibited from socializing with boys, going on dates, or staying out past 9 o'clock in the evening. Every friendship was monitored, and their parents always knew where and with whom their children spent time. Consequently, Sarai's entire world revolved around home, school, and church, and her social circle was confined to those environments. For an energetic and socially inclined young woman, such confinement felt stifling and dull. Yet her parents remained convinced that these restrictions served their children's best interests. During her school years, Sarai initially aspired to enroll in a pedagogical university and pursue a teaching career in the arts or cultural studies. However, toward the end of her education, she developed a keen interest in psychology and began considering a career path in that field instead. During one of the gatherings of the religious community, the slender, dark-haired beauty caught the attention of a young man named Steven Sierra. He was the first to approach her, finding an excuse to start a conversation. Sarai was barely 18 years old at the time, while her new acquaintance was 7 years older than her. Yet, despite the age difference, and with their parents' approval, the two young people began dating. Stephen immediately made a good impression on Dennis and Bethany, who believed that this decent, polite, and honest young man would be an ideal match for their daughter. It is likely that Sarai was not deeply in love with him, but she agreed to marry him mainly to finally leave her parents' home and free herself from their strict supervision. It should be noted that Sarai maintained a good relationship with her parents, though she desired some independence, the chance to live her own life and make her own choices for the future. Less than a year after they met, in February 1999, the couple married. At that time, the bride was 19 years old and the groom was 26. Shortly afterward, the newlyweds moved to the state of Michigan, where Stephen's parents resided. For Sarai, this relocation was a significant event, since she had spent nearly her entire life in her native New York without ever leaving it for long. The change of environment proved beneficial for her, as she seemed to come alive in her new surroundings. Sarai took great pleasure in shopping for her home, decorating it with care, and enjoying new acquaintances and places. She secured a position as a receptionist at a local dental clinic and began contemplating the idea of pursuing a college education after all. However, Sarai soon became pregnant and gave birth to two children, first a son and then a daughter. Her plans for university had to be postponed, as the young woman became completely immersed in motherhood and found joy in it. A few years later, the Sierra family, now with two children, decided to move once again. This time, they headed to sunny California, settling in the scenic Silver Lake district of Los Angeles. There, Stephen was offered a job, but before long, the couple realized that his earnings were insufficient to support their needs. After discussing their situation, they decided to return to New York, where they rented a modest apartment not far from the Jimenez family home. At that stage, the couple struggled with serious financial difficulties. Sarai stayed at home with the children, while her husband survived on irregular work, which often forced them into debt. Things began to improve once the children started school, and Sarai was able to take a job at an advertising agency. Stephen had by then secured a stable position as a city bus driver. A new hobby. As Sarai approached her 30s, with her children grown and life becoming more stable, she revisited her long-standing dream of obtaining higher education. By that time, the teaching profession no longer attracted her, and she decided instead to study psychology, enrolling in one of the local universities. However, Sarai soon lost interest in her academic pursuits, finding the endless lectures dull and uninspiring. She began seeking a new path, an activity that would excite her, inspire her, and allow her to express herself creatively. Since Sarai had always been a creative individual, gifted in drawing and in perceiving beauty in everything around her, she developed an interest in photography and soon joined a well-known New York photography community to further grow in this field. She quickly gained recognition for her genuine talent. Sarai had an exceptional ability to select perfect angles and compose her shots harmoniously, producing images of astonishing beauty. Even professional photographers praised her work for its originality and artistic vision. In early 2012, following the suggestion of her colleagues, Sarai created a page on one of the popular social media platforms, where she began posting her photographs. Her success came swiftly, and thousands of users started subscribing to her profile, leaving enthusiastic comments under each of her photos. Within a few months, she became a true online sensation, and her number of followers continued to grow rapidly. This sudden fame went to Sarai's head a little, and she began to feel that she could achieve far more, that she needed to progress and perfect her craft. Therefore, she proposed organizing a group photo tour in search of beautiful and unusual locations across various parts of the world. Sarai Sierra began with small trips within her home country, specializing in photographing architectural landmarks and different historical sites. Her works were widely admired, and she decided not to stop there. Sarai dreamed of traveling to Istanbul, one of the most ancient and breathtaking cities in the world, to capture its landmarks and cultural monuments. It is worth noting that her parents were not pleased with this idea, as she had never before left the United States or been away from home for such an extended period. However, Sarai remained resolute. Furthermore, she was supposed to be accompanied by her closest friend, Magdalena. At that time, Sarai's family life was in crisis, and her marriage to Stephen was falling apart. Perhaps one reason behind her decision to embark on a photo tour on the other side of the world was her desire to escape, change her surroundings, and reflect on her family situation from a distance. Having lived under strict boundaries for too long, Sarai now longed to do something for herself, something that truly spoke to her spirit. During this period, her husband's social media page began to feature peculiar posts and statuses. He mused about the meaning of marriage, love, and mutual respect between spouses, and wrote that he would never betray his wife even if their relationship were falling apart. In one post, Stephen indirectly hinted that his wife had been unfaithful, but he deleted the message a few hours later, leaving the curious comments below it unanswered. It was clear that Stephen felt unloved and unhappy, attempting to convey his pain publicly through social media. Sarai was enduring similar emotional turmoil, but kept her feelings private, refusing to complain and instead focusing on her creative pursuits. The long-awaited journey. Shortly before her planned trip, Sarai learned that her best friend would be unable to accompany her due to work-related issues. The young woman was deeply disappointed, but she refused to cancel her plans, as she had been preparing for this journey for too long. Sarai's relatives expressed concern about her traveling alone to a foreign country across the ocean, but she reassured them that everything would be fine, promising to call, write, and send photographs every day. Moreover, Sarai also intended to visit Germany and Austria, where she already had several photography assignments scheduled. Her itinerary was carefully planned, down to the hour, and she had no intention of deviating from it. On January 7, 2013, the young American woman boarded a flight from New York to Istanbul. She carried a small amount of cash, a smartphone, a tablet, a modest DSLR camera, and several professional-grade lenses. Upon arrival, Sarai contacted her family, letting them know that she had landed safely and was heading to the hotel she had booked in advance. It should be emphasized that she was traveling on a rather limited budget, which forced her to stay in a distant district that locals considered unsafe. After leaving her belongings in her room and changing out of her travel clothes, Sarai Sierra immediately headed to the nearest metro station to reach the historic center of the city. She spent the entire day wandering through Istanbul's streets until nightfall, capturing its beauty through her lens and relishing every photograph she took. In the evenings, she would video call her parents and husband, sharing her impressions and her plans for the following day. She also took time to edit her new photos and post them on her social media pages. A new friend. As later became known, Sarai was not alone in Istanbul. She was accompanied by a young man named Talon. They had first met online in mid-2012, and it was Talon who persuaded the American woman to travel to Turkey. For several months, they maintained an active correspondence and grew very close during that period. Sarai fully trusted her new acquaintance. They met almost every day and together visited numerous landmarks. Being a native of Istanbul, Talon knew the city inside out and organized exciting excursions for Sarai to some of the most fascinating and unusual places. After spending a week in Turkey, the photographer had arranged to visit a couple of European countries, where, as previously mentioned, she had scheduled several commercial photo sessions. In order to save money on accommodation, Sarai had arranged in advance to stay with her followers, people who had admired her work for a long time. Therefore, upon arriving at the airport in Vienna, she was met by a young man who hosted her at his home for a couple of days. This Austrian acquaintance was a few years older than Sarai. He was also passionate about photography and greatly admired her art, so he was eager to meet and talk with such a talented photographer in person. The trip went smoothly according to her plan. Sarai visited all the sites she had set out to see and met everyone she had intended to. On the third day, she flew to Berlin, where she was likewise greeted at the airport by some of her followers, who gave her a tour around the city. After completing all her scheduled work in Germany, the photographer returned to the airport once again and boarded a flight back to Istanbul, where she intended to stay 2 more days before returning home. Upon arrival, she was met by Talon, and the two spent the day driving around the city, after which they went together to a popular local bar. It was already past midnight when Talon escorted Sarai back to her hotel, where they said goodbye. A mysterious disappearance in a foreign land. On January 21, 2013, the final day of her photo tour, Sarai called her parents and husband to tell them what time and which flight she would be taking back to New York. Having never been away from home for so long before, everyone was delighted that her journey was finally coming to an end. However, before her departure, Sarai decided to take one last stroll around the city and capture a few more beautiful photographs for her portfolio. At the scheduled time, Sarai's father arrived at the airport to pick up his daughter, as her husband was working and unable to come. He arrived early, worried that heavy traffic might cause him to be late. They announced the plane's arrival. All the passengers disembarked, but Sarai was not among them. Her phone was also unreachable, and every attempt to contact her proved unsuccessful. Dennis waited a bit longer and then, worried about his daughter's absence, approached the airline representatives. However, Dennis was utterly stunned when they told him that no passenger under that name had boarded the aircraft. Dennis immediately called Stephen to inform him of the situation, saying that a search needed to be organized without delay. Sarai's husband first contacted the hotel in Istanbul where his wife had been staying, but was told that her belongings were still in the room. She had not checked out, though she was supposed to the previous day, and she had not appeared at the hotel for 2 days. This information caused real panic among the family members, as they had no idea where Sarai was or how to proceed. Stephen, who had access to his wife's accounts, decided to check them in search of clues. There, he found messages between his wife and Tylan, which appeared highly suspicious to him. Nevertheless, he decided to contact the Turk himself to find out what he knew. But Tylan claimed he had seen the missing woman the day before her scheduled departure and that she had not called him before the flight, although she had promised to. Sarai's family immediately reported the incident to the American embassy in Turkey. The following day, a large-scale search operation was organized on-site, and a special unit was even formed for that purpose. Almost immediately, Sarai's husband and parents flew to Istanbul, deciding they needed to personally take part in the search. Moreover, since not much time had passed since her disappearance, there was still a strong chance of finding her alive. The investigating police officers first decided to identify the American woman's social circle and question those who had seen her shortly before she vanished. Those called to testify included the hotel staff where she had stayed, as well as her friend Tylan. The hotel manager stated that he had last seen Ms. Sierra the night before her departure. She had been leaving with a small bag and a camera in hand. She was supposed to check out later, but never returned to the hotel. The next morning, they received a call from her worried husband, who informed them that Sarai's belongings and documents were still in the room. The receptionist also described the clothes Sarai had been wearing that day. The situation with Tylan turned out to be far more intriguing and ambiguous. First, the man's real name was actually Tarkan, and why he had introduced himself to his new acquaintance under a false name remained unclear. Secondly, they had been in close communication for several months prior to their meeting, and Sarai had come to Istanbul at his invitation. All this indicated that there might have been a romantic relationship between them, but Tarkan firmly denied it, claiming that they were nothing more than friends. The next phase of the investigation was to reconstruct, in as much detail as possible, the route Sarai had taken that day. For this purpose, her cell phone data was analyzed, along with footage from street surveillance cameras. It was determined that the young woman had taken the subway to the Sultanahmet district, visited the promontory between the Bosphorus Strait and the Golden Horn Bay, and stopped by the Eminönü market. However, she was lost there in the large crowd of tourists. Her trail was then traced back to the subway, where she was seen descending to head toward the Saraburni walls, but soon disappeared from the camera's view again. Frightening discovery. The search teams decided to head to the ruins of the Saraburni walls to comb through the area and speak with locals. Perhaps someone remembered seeing a lone woman holding a camera. After several hours, the search yielded results, though grim ones. The lifeless body of a young woman was found near the ruins of the ancient Constantinople walls. It was covered with an old, dirty blanket, which made it difficult to notice. Investigators assumed that Sierra had been brought there wrapped in that blanket. Forensic experts estimated that the body had lain there for around 10 to 12 days before being discovered. The lower part of the body was unclothed, which immediately suggested the possibility of sexual assault, later confirmed by experts. The autopsy revealed that Sierra had died from a blow to the head with a blunt, heavy object. In addition, several hematomas were found on her body, and a couple of ribs were broken. Moreover, pathologists discovered epithelial particles and traces of blood beneath Sarai's fingernails, indicating that she had fought back and scratched her attacker. The crime appeared strange and almost senseless, since the victim's bag, smartphone, and camera had been stolen, yet she still wore gold earrings, wedding rings, and an expensive watch, which immediately drew attention. The only footage found from cameras in the vicinity showed a young woman resembling Sarai filming something with her phone. A man then approached her, apparently either striking or pushing her, and both vanished from the camera's view. The attacker was not immediately identified. Versions and conspiracy theories. Almost immediately, information about the case was leaked to the media, nearly sparking an international scandal. The reason was that television networks and newspapers had been making daily appeals to the public to assist in finding the missing American woman and to report any relevant information, while the investigation itself remained silent. When the body was found, the situation grew even more puzzling. Many people began to wonder why a young married woman had suddenly flown alone across the ocean. What was she doing in Istanbul in Europe? And with what funds had she financed her travels? It all seemed suspicious indeed, and investigators initially suspected that Sarai had gone to meet her lover, Talon, also known as Tarkan, and afterward had flown to another man in Austria. But both of her acquaintances denied having any intimate relationship with the victim. Later, it emerged that the man who had sheltered Sarai in Vienna had a criminal record, which led to speculation that he might have used the American woman as a drug courier. However, a thorough investigation did not confirm this theory. There were also rumors that Sarai could have been working for U.S. intelligence services, gathering information in other countries, which allegedly explained the funds for her intercontinental flights. This theory, however, appeared implausible and was not taken seriously. The investigation of this high-profile case was conducted by Turkish Special Services in collaboration with the FBI. Initially, they had no substantial leads. Only several weeks later did the police identify the alleged perpetrator, a previously convicted, unemployed man named Tal Sali, who was collecting waste paper on the city streets. But it was impossible to reach him because almost immediately after the crime, he borrowed money from relatives and left the country, presumably heading to Hatay province, where he crossed the border into Syria illegally. After obtaining a warrant, the police searched the suspect's home, collected a DNA sample, and compared it with the skin particles and seminal fluid found on the murdered woman's body. After that, any remaining doubts were dispelled. Tal Sala was indeed the perpetrator of the crime. Additionally, the victim's phone had last been switched on in the neighborhood where he lived. When it became known that the criminal had fled to Syria, the special services lost all hope of apprehending him. But soon, fate provided an unexpected turn. The man was detained while attempting to cross the border illegally again, this time trying to return to Turkey. He had joined rebel forces in Syria and obtained firearms, but was injured in the conflict and concluded he would be safer back home. However, he carried his weapon with him upon his return, which initially led to his arrest. The local police soon realized the identity of the detainee and immediately notified the security services. When Tal Sala was brought in for questioning, his account was chilling, filled with horrific details. He stated that he saw a young woman on a hiking trail along the Saraburnu walls and for several minutes merely admired her as she took photographs. As he approached, Sarai attempted to communicate with him using gestures, but due to the language barrier, he did not understand her intentions. However, he noticed a brand new iPhone in her hands and an expensive camera around her neck. As Sarai continued walking, he followed her, already intent on robbing her. Darkness was falling, and no other people were near the wall, at least within sight. At one point, Sierra turned around and, as he perceived it, took a photograph of him. That action became a trigger. Tal Sali grabbed a boulder and struck Sierra hard on the head. They then literally rolled together down to the ruins of the wall, likely causing the bruises and broken ribs found on Sarai's body. Taking advantage of the victim's unconscious state, Tal Sali committed acts of sexual violence. He then delivered another severe blow to the head to ensure Sarai's death. Tal Sali took the victim's bag, camera, and phone and walked away. Along the way, he came across a discarded blanket and decided to return to cover the victim's body with it. By then, it was completely dark, and the likelihood of anyone encountering him at the wall was minimal. Once back, he dragged the body slightly to the side, positioning it out of view from the hiking path. He then covered it with the blanket and left. Surprisingly, while the search for the American woman was underway, the perpetrator visited the crime scene once more to confirm that Sarai was dead and that her body remained where he had left it. When Tal Sali learned from the news that his victim had been found, he realized that the police would quickly track him down, so he decided to flee the country, borrowing money from his sister, who had always felt sorry for him. By the way, he never managed to profit from the stolen goods. The camera had been broken when it fell, and the smartphone was locked with a password, which he unsuccessfully tried to bypass at home. As a result, he discarded the phone and all other stolen items when he went on the run. The defendant did not deny his guilt, and judging from his statements, he felt no remorse for what he had done, nor did he suffer any pangs of conscience. As key evidence, DNA forensic results were presented, confirming that his skin was found under the fingernails of the murdered woman and that his seminal fluid was discovered on her body. Additionally, Sarai's cell phone had last been switched on near his residence. The case file also included video surveillance footage capturing the attack itself. After all the evidence was submitted, it was decided that a psychiatric evaluation was necessary due to the belief that Tal Sali might be insane. This suspicion arose from his actions, behavior, and the calm way in which he described in detail the atrocities he had committed. However, experts concluded that he was sane and fully aware of his actions when he attacked his victim. In the summer of 2014, the judge finally delivered the verdict. Tal Sali was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment. Sarai's relatives considered the decision just. After all necessary forensic examinations, the body of the murdered American woman was transported to her homeland in New York, with all associated costs covered by a Turkish airline. Sarai was buried according to all religious rites and traditions. Her family created a website in her memory, where they published her previously unseen works. The photographs achieved great success, attracting interest from people around the world who were willing to purchase them. The money earned from selling the photographs was saved by the family for the college education of orphaned children in honor of Sarai. As for Stephen, he categorically denied that there had been any crisis in his or his wife's family life that might have prompted her fateful trip. Soon afterward, Stephen grew close to a young woman from the Christian community who supported him during this difficult time and often visited his home to help with his children and household tasks. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.